ontem, já viemos, tivemos já a conversar um bocadinho com ele. Agora vai ser a sua masterclass. Eu pediria a organização, o Paulo Trancoso, o nosso presidente da Academia, pediu-me para eu traduzir alguma coisa que não compreendam. Se houver, por acaso, alguma situação, não iria interromper o raciocínio e o trabalho do Peter, mas se vocês tiverem alguma questão que não estejam a compreender, bem, levantam a mão e a gente interrompe e fazemos uma explicação mais detalhada em português, está bem? Peter, you understood everything I said.
Every single word. I wasn't even listening. I was thinking about what I was going to say. Yeah. My Portuguese is like, I know how to say obrigado, and I know how to say galau, and that's it. So sorry. I apologize. But I'm sure you all have good English, no? And if not, we have our friend here who can translate it. Okay?
Go on.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for coming out at such an early hour, especially after you've been partying late into the night, I'm sure. So what am I going to talk about? I don't want to lecture you, okay? I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be a director. I also just want to say that you feel free at any point. I know you were quite shy last night in the Q&A, but you can feel free at any point if you don't understand something, if you want me to talk about something in more detail, you know, just put your hand up, don't be shy. One of the things about being a director is it's about getting what you want, okay? There are different ways and different strategies of getting what you want. So if I'm not giving you what you want, it's up to you, those of you who want to be directors. By the way, how many of you are film students in this room? Can you put your hands up? Okay. And of the film students here, how many of you would like to be a director? Okay, good. So if I'm not giving you what you want, you have to direct me to make sure I give you what you want, okay? That's the first lesson, really, of directing. Because as a director, you don't actually do very much. You have opinions about what other people do, yeah? And I'll be talking in some detail about how you can earn the right to have those opinions and to tell other people what to do. You're going to be working with a cameraman or camerawoman. You're going to be working with a production designer. You'll be working with an editor. You'll be working with actors, amazing but quite tricky people sometimes. You'll be working with producers. You'll be working with financiers. You might be working with studios. You might be working with production companies. There's a whole range of different people. Directing is not, especially I think students, and I had this when I was a film student, I used to think that it's just about what happened on the set, on the day, what lenses you chose, how you moved the actors around, which we call blocking, but you need a much wider skill set than that in order to be able to be a director. And at the end of the day, it boils down, once again, I repeat myself, to a very, very simple thing, which is getting what you want, okay? But to get what you want, you have to know what you want, all right? So let me talk to you a bit about, so I'm not going to be talking about lenses very much today. I'm not going to be talking about technical sides of filmmaking. I'm going to be talking about what I think are the necessary prerequisites to being a director, yeah? Well, what your various skill sets need to be, all right? And one of the most important is getting what you want, and that's being able to manipulate people, okay? Now, I know manipulation is a terrible word, but as a director, that is basically your job description, okay? How to manipulate people. You may think, oh, I'm not manipulative. All of you here are manipulative. Of course you are, you know? It's human nature. We have to know how to work with people, how to bend them to our will, how to make people know we don't want to do certain things, how to make people do things we want them to do. All of us, every minute of the day, from the moment we get up until the moment we go to bed, we manipulate people in different ways, yeah? So sometimes we do it very obviously with a kind of strength of will. Sometimes we do it in more subtle ways. The English are particularly adept in something known as being passive-aggressive, which is where we're super polite and everything, but we hide behind that. We don't seek confrontation, but what we do is we use that as a way of trying to manipulate people, okay? So the more that you understand that and understand how you're doing that, especially when you're working in a filmmaking situation, the better. Sometimes it needs, well, let's see, how can we define it? Sometimes it's the carrot, okay? You're encouraging people. and sometimes it's a stick, yeah? And there are many, many different ways of doing this. But in order to bend people to your will, in order to make people listen to you, in order to make people listen to you and want to obey you, okay, rather than just pushing back, you need to create yourself as a director, let me say. You need to turn yourself into someone that you may partially be at the moment, you know, but I think it's a full-time job. It's something that never ever ends. And you need to have a control of the language of cinema, and you need to understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about personal biography. The thing about filmmakers is that it's not like going to work for a bank. It's not like going to work for a corporation. There is very little organized career structure, yeah, which makes it really difficult and really frustrating once you leave college and you try to get ahead and try to make things and make things with bigger budgets. The thing is that if we have a look at the way that Tarkovsky, say, the great Russian filmmaker, the way that he was able to progress in his career is completely different to the way that you will. The times are different, the government is different, the social structure is different. Each of you will have to find your own way of navigating the particular circumstances, but I think there are things that can help you, and I want to talk about some of the things that have helped me that I think have a general application. For me, the first and most important thing is film history, okay? How many of you here have seen a silent film? Okay, good. All right. A silent film, a silent movie, okay? Now, as you probably know, and if you don't know, you should do some more research. Cinema started just over 100 years ago. The Lumiere brothers, the French claim to be the first filmmakers. You know, in Britain, we claim there's a guy called William Fries Green. In America, they say that it was Edison, but I think you could probably reliably say that the Lumiere brothers were the first, really. And there's an amazing story of a film that they made about a train coming into a station. Okay, so people are sitting in a cinema like you, and everyone sees the train coming towards them. It was such a new thing, such a new experience, that half the audience got up and ran out because they thought it was a real train coming through, trying to hit them. To return to my more general point, though, the more that you guys understand about the history of the medium, going back to Lumiere, going through silent film, looking at whether it be, you know, the great silent comedies of Chaplin or Buster Keaton, maybe some of the early films of Fritz Lang, German Expressionism, the more that you can understand not only Western cinema, but let's say cinema from India, cinema from China, cinema from Latin America, the more that you understand the way that the language has developed over the years, over the last 100 years, the better filmmaker you will be, okay? Now, this is for a number of different reasons. One is because it will feed you. It will feed your imagination, and you will have a range of references at your fingertips that will enable you to communicate with the people that you collaborate with. And communicating is the most important way you have of making the world bend to your will and getting your own way as a director, okay? And any film that you're embarking on, whether it be a short film as a student, whether it's something longer, whether it's a piece of TV, if it's a telenovela, a soap opera, if it's an art house feature film, if it's a superhero movie, if you understand the way people have told stories in the past, if you understand certain genres, okay, and the development within those genres, if you understand the tropes, if you understand the language, then you will be a better filmmaker, okay? Now, I began the process of education, which is one that never finishes, by the way, began the process of education really when I was 15 years old. I was a big fan of reggae music, and I still am. I made a documentary recently about a bunch of Jamaicans, older Jamaican musicians, and I used to go from my home in West London to an area called Portobello Road in London. It was a big market, street market on the weekends. And I'd take my pocket money and I'd go and buy go and try and find some records. I could normally only afford to buy singles, going up to the specialist record shops, thank you, of there was a shop called Daddy Cool, which was my favourite reggae record shop. And one day I went up there and Daddy Cool was closed. There'd been a death in the family, the guy had gone back to Jamaica. So I was stuck there, I had my money in my pocket. I'd say at that point that I enjoyed movies, but I enjoyed movies like I would go and see James Bond, I would go and see, you know, a war film, an adventure film. I hadn't really fallen passionately in love with movies. I watched them for entertainment. I certainly didn't think about that as being a vocation or something that would lead me many years later to standing in a room in Albufeira talking to a bunch of strangers. You know, life can take you on a strange journey. But what happened that day? It was raining, the record shop was shut. I didn't want to spend my money going in and buying a cup of bad English coffee. The coffee was very bad back in England in the late 70s, early 80s. So there was a cinema called the Electric Cinema on Portobello Road. It's a repertory cinema, okay. Now this, for the mostly young people here among you, there's some older ones who will know what I mean. This was before streaming, before DVDs, before VHS. Some of you probably weren't even born when VHS was invented, you know. It was a time when in the UK we had just 3 TV channels. Can you imagine that? No computers, no IT, no digital, no nothing at all. So the only way you could get to see old films, they would either crop up late at night on BBC Two, you know, so you'd have to watch them, or on TV, but very, very few. Or there were these things called repertory cinemas that would play old movies. And one of these was like quite a rundown, smelly, a flea pit, if that means anything to you. You know, they call it a flea pit because you might catch fleas from sitting in the seats. All the seats were old and broken. But the fantastic thing about this cinema was that it would just show films from the whole of the previous, at that point, let's say 60, 75 years of cinema history. So I wandered in there because it was dry inside, because it was cheap to get into, and I didn't have a clue what I was going to see, all right? And when I went in, a film was starting, Pierrot le Fou, by Jean-Luc Godard. He's a French New Wave director. And I went in and I sat down, and that was probably the most important 2 hours of my entire life. What happened when I was sitting in the chair watching that, because it was completely unexpected, and it completely changed the way that I thought and the way that I looked at the world, and led to me wanting to become a film director. For those of you that don't know it, it's a very daring film. On one level, it's just a straightforward adventure film about a man and a woman going on the run who are involved, you know, one of whom is involved with some shadowy liberation, revolutionary organization. But Godard, being a very brave and experimental filmmaker, especially in the mid-1960s, tells the story in a way that I'd never seen beforehand. Characters would suddenly turn around and talk to the camera in the middle of scenes. The music that normally you would expect to run through very, very smoothly would stop and start randomly, and it would draw your attention to the way the music was being used. In a film that seemed to be an adventure film, suddenly a character would start singing, and it would turn into a musical. He was jumping around from genre to genre. He was breaking rules I didn't even know existed, but because I'd accepted them as being, this is the way films are. So during that 2 hours, not only was I completely entranced because there was a romanticism to it, to what was going on, because it was Paris, it was 1968, maybe the film was about 15 years, had been made 15 years beforehand. Also, you know, for an adolescent, you know, a young teenage boy at a tender age, there was the most beautiful and talented actress I'd ever seen in my life, Anna Karina, who I completely fell in love with. So it worked on a number of levels. It worked intellectually for me, it worked emotionally, and it worked, you know, pressing the buttons that teenage boys like to have pressed. So I emerged from the cinema a completely different person to the person that I went in. It was in that moment I became aware that there was such a thing as a director. Beforehand, I'd watched films where directors had hidden themselves in a way. They told the story in a conventional way, in a conventional linear way. You know, this was long before I understood what Jean-Luc Godard meant when he said, you know, film has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. And coming out of the cinema, I just thought, I need to see more of this. This is incredible. I had no idea that cinema could be like this. So for me, watching this old film was a gateway into beginning to understand film language, beginning to understand what the medium could do, and I was transported and delighted and entertained and confounded and confused, and it was a completely joyous experience. So having found this place, basically the Electric Cinema then became like my church, my temple, if you like. So I went to a school where every Wednesday afternoon we would have sports. We'd go for sports. I was never very sporty. I'm still not very sporty. But we'd have to get on a bus from the school in West London, half an hour away, to where the playing fields were. But what I decided that I had to do was I had to spend as much time as possible in the cinema. So instead of getting on the bus and going off to the sports field, what I did was I signed up to 2 separate sports. So I signed up to do football and I signed up to do tennis. And then I went to the tennis people and I told them I was doing football. And then I went to the football people and I told them I was doing tennis. So neither of them expected me to be there. And instead, every Wednesday afternoon, I got in a bus, different bus to the bus all the other kids were getting on, yeah. And in my school uniform, it was a very old-fashioned school, I took the bus, instead of half an hour that way, I took it half an hour that way from Hammersmith into Notting Hill Gate, walked down Portobello Road, and would just go and sit in the cinema all afternoon, and I'd watch at least 2, sometimes 3 films. Sometimes I'd come in the middle of a film, depending on what time I'd managed to get there. And the amazing thing about this cinema is that it would show a fantastic array of different films. I wouldn't know what I was going to see. So one day I might go in and I might see a Bollywood musical. The next week I'd go in and I'd see maybe Pandora's Box by Pabst. The week after I'd see an Aldrich movie. The week after that there'd be a Chabrol and a Truffaut. So without realizing it, I was managing to build up an incredible array of very, very different kind of films that fed my head, that fed my imagination, that helped me understand the different kinds of storytelling there were, the different approaches there were, and what cinema really was, how different it was in different countries, how different it was in different eras. And the particular love that I had, and the films I always tried to see, were the French New Wave films that spoke to me because there was a youthful energy about them, there was a lightness of touch. It taught me something which I think is quite relevant to today, in that part of the reason that the French New Wave even existed was a technological breakthrough. Just like the language of cinema has been changed over the past few years by digital technology, by the fact that we all have in our pockets, well, maybe not all of us, but many of us, certainly in this room, we have smartphones. You can shoot. I could shoot a film now. I could upload it onto YouTube all within 10 minutes. So there's been incredible breakthroughs since I first became interested in cinema. Equally, there was a technological breakthrough at the time. And I just, as a teenager, began to soak up all these different kinds of storytelling, which put me on a different path, let's say, to friends and colleagues who would go and see the latest, let's say the equivalent of a superhero movie or whatever, the latest commercial films that were going out, the equivalent of Batman back in its day. It meant I had access to a whole other range of voices and a whole other range of narrative techniques, if you like, and it expanded my horizons, and it began to teach me as a filmmaker. So in terms of my particular journey, I think that is possibly the most important thing that happened, was wandering into that. So I don't know, if I hadn't wandered into that cinema at that moment and seen that film, I don't know whether I'd be here talking to you today. Now, sometimes it can be a bit daunting because you don't know where to start, but I can tell you where to start now. There's a series, and I'm going to have to look up the name of it. There's a guy there that I remember. There's a filmmaker called Mark Cousins, okay? British filmmaker, C-O-U-S-I-N-S, Mark Cousins. And he did a 10-part documentary series, which is called The History of Cinema, okay? So, I mean, it took me 3 or 4 years of going to the Electric non-stop every weekend and every Wednesday. I did get caught, by the way, after a while at school, and I got punished for it. But, by then, I realized that it was worth it. But Mark Cousins' The Story of Film is 10 one-hour-long episodes, and it takes you through the entire history of film, so you can cram my 4 years into 10 hours of learning, and it really is worth you doing that. It has clips from the films, He has a very particular storytelling style, which you might not all like, but I think it's the best introduction that you can find, and it's definitely worth 10 hours of your time. So that, if you like, was the first stepping stone, yeah, in terms of me becoming a filmmaker. The second thing, and this is very much to do with the environment that I grew up in, was to do with my grandfather. My grandfather was a very keen, not particularly talented, but a very keen amateur painter. Yeah, as it wasn't his job, he worked in the clothing industry, but he loved paintings, and he lived in a basement flat, also in West London. And as a young child, 5, 6 years old, when I went there, there was a hallway, and it had wallpaper in there, and the wallpaper was like lots of little frames. It was just like a pattern like this. And what he would do, whenever he went to an exhibition, he would buy postcards, and he would stick the postcards up on the wall. Okay, so the entire entrance hallway, like quite a long hallway into his apartment, was like a picture gallery. And so his favourite game with me as a kid between the ages of 5 and 10 was getting me to guess who the painters were. So every time I would turn up, he would point to a different painting. And so as a precocious and no doubt quite irritating young child, by the age of 10, I knew the difference between Braque and Picasso and Monet and Manet and Van Gogh. And he would literally go down, and it was just the most, I mean, for me it was a game. I didn't realise. But that planted the seeds of a love of art, which, and any of you who came and watched my film last night know that resulted in me making a film about Vermeer. But I think a knowledge and a love of the visual arts is incredibly important. And why? Because visual arts are about composition, they're about lighting, they're about mood, they're about visual storytelling. They use signs and symbols, iconography as it's called. There's a whole range of ways, and even though they're not moving pictures, they're still pictures, there's a whole range of ways in which a knowledge of the way that artists tackle a certain storytelling problem, the way they resolve it, the way they use colour, the way they use composition, the way they use light, so on and so forth, the subjects that they choose, so on and so forth. All of these things have a very, very strong bearing to the art and the craft that you're involved with. So I think the more understanding, the more understanding that you have of the visual arts, the better. And these kind of things can really help you to communicate. There's a couple of things I'm trying to help you understand. Okay, these things are useful tools. Okay, in that you can communicate. Let's say that you write a film that is a comedy, and you want to communicate to the people that you're working with the kind of film it is, the kind of film you want to make, the tone, the style. What better way than to show them other films? Yeah? There are many different kinds of comedies. You've got physical comedy, like the Three Stooges. You've got, or like Charlie Chaplin. You know, you've got more verbally dexterous comedy. You've got screwball comedy. There's many different kinds of comedy that have existed, many different genres with many different strategies in terms of the way that they work. By showing your collaborators one particular film rather than another, you help educate them as to the kind of film you want to make, the kind of direction you want to move in. It's a fantastic way of working. And by testing your ideas against previous films, which are successful in your mind or unsuccessful in your mind, you know, then I think you are more likely to make a better film yourself. Just the same way, I'd say that when you come to communicate with production designers or directors of photography, sometimes showing a painting can be much, much better than anything else because it's a visual medium. It's sometimes difficult to talk about visuals with words. Yeah? So what better way to help a production designer or a costume designer understand the palette that you want, the mood that you want, the feeling that you want, than to be able to look at a range of paintings from history, whether they be abstract expressionist, whether they be realist paintings, whether it's paintings from the Renaissance, depending on the kind of mood that you want to get. It's an incredibly useful thing to do. But there's also another added benefit in all of this, which is that you have to stand on a set and make people obey you in some way. It doesn't mean that you're there shouting at everyone or and the rest of it. You can have but you need some kind of authority, yeah? And the authority needs to come from more than just the fact that you've been given the title director, yeah? Because especially crews, professional crews will have dealt with many different directors, and they can normally sniff out who a good one and who a bad one is. But the more you are an alert, alive, educated, creative, someone who loves culture, who understands culture, who is engaged with the arts, the more that you're like that, the more that you have this wide frame of reference, the more that you're going to earn those people's respect. Okay, so it will not only enrich your life on an individual level. I sound like an American self-help book here. I'm sorry, but it's true. You know, the more that, and it will educate you, but it will also mean that people will look at you in a different way. I mean, if you're on a set and you're talking about a specific kind of a shot, and you can instantly say, it's a camera movement like that Offals film from 1952, which one? Yeah, La Ronde. You know, now even if the camera person that you're talking to doesn't know what that movement is, you're instantly in a position of authority there because you've shown that you understand film history, that you've got a grasp of the medium that you're working in, that you're an intelligent, thinking, cultured person, that you know what it is you want to do. Yeah? I mean, you can walk onto a set and you might have a minimal understanding of the technicalities of which lens you want, what kind of camera you want to use, what kind of camera, you know, what the pieces of equipment are. But if you've got a very firm grasp of what your story is, what it says on the surface, what the subtext is, how the kind of mood and atmosphere you want to create, what the genre is, what the genre rules are, how you're obeying them in some instances and disobeying them in others, the more that you have a grasp of your opinion about things that are happening in the world, yes, the kind of story you want to tell, why you want to tell that story, the better filmmaker you will be. You might spend absolutely no time in your career as a film student learning anything about any technical aspects, you know. You might concentrate on trying to understand stories that you want to tell, the message that you want to give out to the world. That is infinitely more important because you can always find collaborators. I'm not saying you should be technically ignorant or incompetent because you will learn the technicalities of the medium as you carry on. But the most important thing is to be a living, breathing kind of aesthetic individual that has an understanding of the world around them, has an understanding of people's psychology, for example, you know, which is another really important thing because you can't manipulate people if you don't understand psychology. But equally, you can't talk to actors unless you understand cause and effect in terms of why does someone behave like this? Why does your story work in a certain way? You have to really be a student of human psychology as well and of human behavior. So I think as a director, you should never ever be bored in any situation. It's like if you're on the bus, then you should be looking at people around you. You should be looking at the way they sit, the way they talk, the way they interact with their devices. You should be studying behavior wherever you are because you're going to be in a situation where you have to replicate people's behavior. And even if there was someone last night who asked me a question at the screening, you know, and said that they preferred films like Lord of the Rings, which takes place obviously in a make-believe world. But the thing about make-believe worlds is you have to work even harder to make people feel they're real. So you have so people, there have to be a set of internally self-consistent rules, okay? And you have to obey those rules within a story. And one of those rules is to do with psychology. Now, it may be that elf psychology or orc psychology is different to human psychology, but you're obviously going to go from an understanding of what's around us, either from understanding of humans or understanding of the way that animals behave, you know, so on and so forth. So I think that what I would say is that becoming a great director, or becoming even a good director, a halfway decent director, is a constant process of education, self-education, you know. So we've talked about cinema, we've talked about art. I would argue that you also have to understand about storytelling, which means that you should I mean, not everyone likes reading, okay? And I know there's many people who maybe have more in common with comic books than they do with Dostoevsky, okay? But comic books also are a way of telling stories, and people have gone on to have fabulous careers just from understanding that. But at least if you come to grips with comic books, you understand a visual way of telling a story. But if you have read Flaubert or Graham Greene or Cervantes or whoever, then you understand more about the world, you understand more about characters, you understand more about storytelling, you understand a way that a world is built. So, and then once again, it means that when you're in discussion on the set, rather than your only reference being the last Batman movie, you're not going to impress people that much if you're just saying, oh, this is like the last Batman movie. But if you can talk about Dostoevsky and Pabst and any of the other great masters of different fields of literature or art, then instantly you become a much more imposing individual, okay? Now, you don't have to be able to, like me, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now, and I remember very well sitting at the back there feeling slightly shy and thinking, I'm never going to be able to become a director, okay? And all I'll say to you is that if I can do it, you guys can do it, all right? It took me a very, very long time before I became director, before I had the courage of my own convictions, if you like, to admit that I wanted to do it. It was a secret ambition, yeah, something that I kept to myself. I didn't go to film school till I was in my mid-20s. I didn't start working in this business properly until I was in my late 20s. I spent 8-9 years working as an editor. I then went on to make TV documentaries, and then to TV drama, and finally to movies. It was a very, very long process of education and of, let's say, finding the confidence and the self-confidence and the courage to do that. And that's something else. Some people are born with it, yeah, and some people acquire it over time. But I do think that educating yourself as much as possible, being aware of the world, this is the way that you start to have a voice, you start to develop a notion of the kinds of stories that you want to tell. Some people are just, as if by a miracle, they're just born with all of these things. But most of us have to work over time, and we have to perfect ourselves, if you like, and we grow as people over a period of time. We have different life experiences. I think maybe coming out of film school and going straight into directing, it's not necessarily the best thing, and apart from anything else, it's a great struggle, and it can be very difficult to find that first job. So, but maybe it would be better to go and work as a porter in a hospital or a waiter for a few years, to immerse yourself in a world where you interact with people on a daily basis. You see a different side of life. You begin to understand what life is like. There's a lot of cinema, which I think often in America you have privileged white kids who go to a very expensive college like USC, University of Southern California, also known as the University of Spoiled Children. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education. They're able to make a very nice little, like graduation film. They then come out and they start doing some work in Hollywood. These films might be technically acceptable, but they have no life about them, because all they've ever done is they've gone from their little privileged bubble, one privileged bubble of their upbringing, into another privileged bubble of their school, and then into a final privileged bubble of Hollywood. And so there's no reality in there. So you have to think of this, I think, as being a long-term project, being a director. And the other thing is just to examine the reasons as to why you want to do it, okay? Because if you're here because you want to be famous, then go and become a reality TV star, okay? Because the chances that anyone in this room will become famous, so maybe all of you will become, but I doubt it very much. Maybe one of you will. But most likely you've got to, I guess my point is you have to do it for the love of the medium, and because you have a burning desire to tell stories. You have to be very, very honest with yourself, yeah, about what it is. Now, it doesn't mean that you might not be a bit of a show-off like me. So we all like public, I'm able to get up in front of you and talk like this. Some people are more egotistical than others. That's fine, that's all the fuel. But what is it you really want to do? What is it you really want to say? I would also say if you want to get rich, you're probably better off working in another area like real estate or banking or something, okay? Go into business. And then afterwards, once you've become very rich, you can come be a filmmaker. You may make money out of filmmaking, yeah? But it's not, you know, like becoming famous or becoming rich, I don't think are the best reasons to do this. You should do it because you're passionate about this medium. You should do it because you can't imagine doing anything else. You know, you should do it because you have something to say, because you want to tell stories, because you think it's an important thing in this day and age to be able to reveal different aspects of the world to people. You should do it just because you have to do it. Yeah. If you don't have that level of commitment, then it's likely that you won't make the grade, okay? Now, if you do have that level of commitment, it doesn't mean automatically that you're going to have a fantastic career. I know many people, and some very talented people, who for different reasons haven't made a success, have left the business. It can be, and I don't want to do this too much, because it's an amazing business. I'm very privileged to have worked in it, but it can be very difficult. You can go years without having a job, you know? You have ups and downs. People love one film that you've made, great, you feel fantastic, but then the next one they hate. You have to be able to deal with that, and you know you have to be able to you have to learn from your failures. You're more likely to, well, certainly for me, I've had more failures than I've had successes, but you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. Success isn't necessarily that good for you as a human being. It's very nice, but it's you know it's deceptive. So be honest with yourself about why you want to do it. Okay, and the path that you want to take. The other thing I'd say from a practical point of view is that you need to understand the business in your own country, okay? Now, in every single country and in every single era, the way in which you become a successful filmmaker is going to be different. The paths are going to be different, okay? Now, I'm not that much of an expert on Portuguese television, Portuguese films, the commercial films, the art house films, the financing structure, you know, Portuguese Film Commission or whatever you have here that you can get awards from. But you guys need to, because this is the way that you will plot your career. You need to make some decisions. You need to make some decisions about, are you going to be a writer-director? It's the thing that everyone aspires to, but it's not necessarily what you should do, yeah? I mean, there are some people who are writer-directors who are much better writers than they are directors. There are some people who are writer-directors who are much better directors than they are writers. And filmmaking is very much about collaboration. So try and understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, yeah? So I know some fantastic directors who are terrible script writers who wasted years trying to get not particularly good scripts made. And then when they finally came to their senses, they had fantastic careers directing other people's scripts. Because even when you direct other people's scripts, you put so much of yourself into it, okay? So be honest with yourself, I think. It's very important. Also, understand who the production companies are that are out there and what kind of films are they making, what are the films that get funded, what are the films that the local government agencies that are helping, that are giving grants to, what kind of budget levels are they at, who are the actors that are up and coming, who are the actors that are successful that can get films made. The more that you can research and understand this little pond that you're in, the Portuguese pond, and then maybe you can then look wider than that, you know, into the countries around. But start with your own back door, because this is where you're going to need to make your first successes. I know many people, and some quite talented people, who have gotten a plane and flown out to Hollywood expecting to get their break like that, only to find that they are working in a Starbucks and there are 5,000 other people trying to do exactly the same thing, probably more than 5,000. I mean, you know, if you chuck a rock in Hollywood, you're going to hit it will hit an actor, it will bounce off and hit a screenwriter, and then bounce off and hit an unemployed director. It's much better to have some success locally in your own country and then build from that if it's an international career that you want. You need to understand not only what's going on in terms of feature films, you need to understand what's going on in terms of local TV and regional TV. Yeah, you need to know who are the producers who are doing the kind of work that you're interested in. Yeah, because later on, for me, one of the most disorienting moments I had as I kind of made this long, slow march to where I am today was leaving film school, because film school, there was a structure. Yeah? You had certain tasks that were set. You had films to make. You had lessons to go to. You had lectures to attend and all the rest of it. And the moment you leave there, suddenly that support network is gone. And it's incredibly confusing and really difficult. And I know some people who never recovered from that, okay? But the more that you can understand other people's careers, yeah, the more that you can understand the network of producers and of TV stations and of financiers, the more likely you are to be able to get ahead. And I would urge you also to try and find mentors, which is much easier now because of Twitter and social media generally. And I think you'll find that a lot of people will you know, if you're a young, and not necessarily young either, but you know, enthusiastic, passionate about this medium, then you'll get, you know, one of the things that can really be helpful is, for example, maybe you get in touch with a director who's 5 or 10 years older than you. Maybe it's a director you've idolized since you were very young. Maybe it's someone who is just ahead of you in terms of their career path. Get to know them on Twitter, or write to them, or, you know, arrange to bump into them at a film festival, whatever it might be. Don't be a weird stalker and scare them away, but engage them. And you can look at their experience and you can begin to understand from talking to people, yeah, how it is they've managed to get on. Because there's no one there to help you. You know, you have to fashion your own path through all of this. And you already will have done it. It might be that you've made a student film that is of some distinction. You know, certainly if you follow the path that I've talked about and you've educated yourself in literature, in art, in film, then people will understand that you're aesthetically engaged in the world and that you have something to say. But then there is the nuts and bolts about finding your career path. For some of you, it might be as simple as writing a great script, okay? Because there are many directors, there are many DOPs, there's many technicians, but the two rarest things in this business are good material, yeah, and star actors, okay? And the good material will attract the star actors, and the star actors will attract the finance. So it might be that you're going to spend your time just sitting and perfecting this script, but you also have to be careful, because I know people who've, well, I wouldn't say wasted, but they've spent 5 years of their life working on their script and working on their script, and the world moves without them, and then you know, all that you have are what's on that piece of paper. So you have to develop a range of contacts, and you have to hopefully have some mentors and people who can guide you through. Don't only talk to other directors, talk to producers, for example, yeah? And if you're not sick, you know, hopefully there is someone out there, you know, let's say in Portugal, who is producing the kind of films that you would like to make. If not, you have to be very clear about what is the kind of film you'd like to see made in Portugal? Why isn't it there? Is it because people don't want to see it, or because it's not being made well? So is this the gap in the market, if you like, that you can be the, you know there's an audience, you know you're representative of an audience. It's a very good point at which to contact a producer and begin to understand. It can help you immensely just going on the set of someone else shooting. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, the world's best director. Even going onto the set of a soap opera can be, you know, can really, really help you. The thing that you will begin to understand is that it's very easy to be a director when you're sitting in this chair here and you're watching a film or you're watching TV. For all of us, it's very easy to look and kind of see, well, why did they do this? Why did they do that? This bit about background action isn't working. I don't like the art direction in this. I don't understand what's, you know, I mean, we have so many opinions, okay? But it's because you're relaxed and you're comfortable and there's no stress and you're being entertained, or you're examining the film that's in front of you. When you're shooting, it's completely different. And any of you who've done shooting will know what I'm talking about, because you're under constant stress. I mean, there's an English director who I know who likens shooting to rescuing furniture from a burning building. Stanley Kubrick very famously called it, he said it's like trying to write War and Peace when you're in a roller coaster. The thing about directing is that you're under immense pressure of time. The clock is ticking. You know, you have to make decisions in and of the moment when you're not necessarily that sure about exactly what it is that you want. And that, I think, is the hardest thing. If you can find a way in your head to kind of clear your head and imagine that you're in your own living room or in a cinema watching something, and you can push all of that stress away, then you're going to do much, much better work than if you're there and super stressed and looking at your watch and worrying you've only got, you know, like 15 minutes to finish the scene. The longer you have in your career, the more you'll realize that, you know, budgets and schedules become some of the most important things in your life. But there's a psychological work that you have to do to be able to get in the zone and to be able to push this pressure away. And for me, it took a few years to learn that, where you're bending the situation to your will rather than being at the mercy of the situation. But the thing that is going to help you through all of this is the amount of preparation that you've done and the amount of preparing yourself as an individual, as I said beforehand. Because if you know what it is you're trying to do, if you understand what the scene is that you're trying to, you know, what is the message of this scene, what is the point of this scene, what is the story that you're telling, what is the mood you're trying to create, if you've got a firm control as a storyteller of what it is you want to do, you're going to be able to navigate these problems much, much more easily than, and it means that you can impose your will rather than being reactive to a situation. And I think it's only once you put yourself in that situation of having that pressure, of having the schedule, of being able to produce good creative work under difficult circumstances, that you'll really, and that's why, again, you know, Kubrick said the best way to become, you know, to learn about filmmaking is to make a film. And I think it's true. Even if you're just taking out your iPhone and you're making little sketches from day to day, I think the more that you do that, the more that you will learn about the medium. How long have I been talking for, by the way? 50 minutes. 50? Really? Oh my God. Sorry. Right, I don't have to talk. Has anyone got any questions so far? How long am I supposed to do this for, by the way? Huh? 1 hour. 1 hour and 50 I'm supposed to do this for. Okay, fine. But I hope we're going to get into questions because I don't want to talk non-stop for the next. Okay, here's a question. Hello. I recognise you from last night. Thank you for coming. We could get a dialogue going, then that would be great. But I can obviously talk for England, so I'm quite happy to talk for another 50 minutes. Hang on a sec. Let's get the...
Hola. Oh, okay. So my question is, how would you say about when you were working as an editor?
Yeah.
How has it shaped you as a director?
In a number of different ways. I'll give you the long answer. So the first thing is that it taught me about the language of film, the way that you use sounds and images to construct a story, the way that you construct scenes, and how important it can be sometimes to have mise en scène, by which I mean you let a shot run and and develop. Other times you want to have something that's very much to do with montage. You understand how plastic and how flexible it is. Understanding editing, I think, is key and is core. And so those years I spent in the editing room, even though towards the end I was very frustrated and wanted to move on from being an editor to being a director, partly didn't suit my personality type. I loved it for the first 5 or 6 years. But I'm not a person to sit in a dark room for the rest of my life, okay? Some people are, and that's great. But I became very frustrated at directors who came back and just said, "I've just been in Thailand for 3 months," and I was in rainy North London in a dark room. And so I thought, I want to be the person who goes to Thailand for 3 months, and indeed I made it happen. But the other thing is that it taught me that there are many different kinds of directors out there, and some of them I really learned a lot from in terms of understanding how they put their shots together, how they told stories. I was working in a wide variety of forms, so I was doing some documentary, some entertainment shows, cookery shows, drama, many different things over that period of time. And I realized some people knew what they were doing and some really didn't. And I began to get a reputation as an editor you could put with the directors who didn't know what they were doing, because producers would know that I could dig them out of trouble. And then I began to be frustrated. Maybe if I'd only ever worked with great directors, I would still be in the cutting room. But I began to get frustrated because I thought, maybe I'm not as good as the really good directors I've worked with, but I'm certainly better than the bad ones. So it meant that I could give myself permission, and it gave me a bit more self-confidence to get out of the cutting room once I'd learned the lessons from there. The other thing that really helps me is that it means that when I'm shooting nowadays and I'm on a set, quite often you have problems. You might have a shot list that is 8 shots. You're running out of time and actors forgetting their lines, a piece of equipment has broken down, the weather was bad, the location manager didn't have the right keys, you couldn't get, there's many things that go wrong and that will always go wrong, And you have your plan, but like Mike Tyson said, and like the Russian military are discovering at the moment, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So a lot of what happens when you're a filmmaker, when you're a director on the set, is metaphorically, hopefully not physically, getting punched in the face. Because you have a plan. It's really important you have a plan. You should know what you want to do. But you also need to be really, really flexible and do something different. Because if you just have your plan and your plan goes wrong, you can't sit there and cry and go, oh, I don't know what to do. You need to come up with another plan. So you're constantly, constantly changing. So what I am able to understand, and I don't even have to think about it, which is, from having spent many years in the cutting room, is I can work out, I may have wanted 8 shots to do this, but I can do it in 3. And so I can understand very quickly what I need to get and how I need to get it, and where these shots are and how they intercut. It's second nature to me now. And the other thing is, I can also understand certain things. Okay, so this is the most important thing you're going to learn today. All right, this is and remember this when you're on your first set, or making your first feature. The big mistake that many directors make, I still, even though I know this, I still make it myself sometimes, is getting hung up on the master shot. Now, basically, let's say I'm going to simplify here massively because it's a very complex subject about how you shoot something. But generally, there is a formula, okay, which is that you do a wide shot, a master shot, and then you might, let's say the typical formula would be a wide shot, a mid shot, and some close-ups, okay? Now, what lots of people do is they rehearse this wide shot. You can spend a bit of time doing that because this is where you're first putting your ideas together. You're working with the actors, and then you do a take, and it's okay. And then you make some adjustments, and then you do another take, yeah. And then you've got to about four takes, and you carry on going because, let's say it's a 3-minute long scene, because it's not been perfect from beginning to end. Okay, and then you do 5 takes, and you do 6 takes, and before you know it, you've done 10 takes. Okay, and then it's problematic because this actor who's very good at the beginning has now burnt out, and they're not doing so well. Well, this actor who wasn't so good at the beginning is doing much better, and now you're beginning to get confused because you can't remember how many takes you've done, and then you look at your watch and you see, oh my God, I'm supposed to finish this scene in the next 10 minutes. And we have a saying in England, I don't know if you know what EastEnders is, I don't know if you have it over here, but it's a long-running soap opera with fairly low production values. Very popular, very successful. I'm not going to knock it, not my cup of tea. But what people say is that if you're not careful, you're directing War and Peace in the morning and directing EastEnders in the afternoon. It's because you put all of your resources into this master shot. Now, if you're an editor, you can understand take 3, the first third of that was really good. I've got that in the bag. Take 4, the beginning was terrible, but the end was fantastic. Yeah, and so you realise that and this is something again that most of the time, I mean, sometimes I have to write it down and mark up the script, but most of the times I know, as long as over my 4 or 5 takes, I have covered the entire scene and I have coverage for each moment, then that's fine by me, because what are the chances that I'm going to run that whole scene in the master shot? If I've deliberately designed a shot and I want to do it all in one take, in a big sweeping Steadicam move, then that's fine. Yeah, then that's okay. Then do more and more takes because you don't have to do the close-ups and the rest of it. But if I'm intending to go on and get close-ups and all the rest of it, I might only be on that master shot for 10 seconds. I might not even use it at the beginning. I might start with close-ups and come to it in the middle. So all I need is to have all those moments captured. I don't need something that's perfect from beginning to end because that's theatre. Yeah. because you're going to get in there with the scissors. So for God's sake, don't screw yourself up and ruin your day by spending hours and hours getting your master shot right and then giving yourself no time at all to do the rest of it. And don't screw yourself up by putting all your time in so you do one scene in the morning and then you've got to do 5 scenes in the afternoon, okay? This is possibly the most important thing of what I've said today that will help. You need self-discipline, okay? And I think that being an editor helped me understand that, because I've spent so long in the cutting room, you know, cutting up other people's stuff, learning from their mistakes, if you like. Yeah? Okay.
I have one question too after this one.
Okay.
Hello. So we can give the same raw footage to 2 different editors,
Yeah.
and in the end we'll have 2 different movies.
Yeah.
My question is, how do you manage that with your editors, and how did you manage that when you were an editor? Do you give them some liberty, or?
I've changed over the years. Because when I was an editor and I moved over to directing, I was terrible, because I wanted to micromanage the process. Because I wasn't being a director, I was being a director when I was directing on the set, and then when I came into the cutting room, I was being an editor, and it took me a while to give that up. And we have this you'll pardon me for being rude now, but you have certain directors who are popularly known as frame fuckers, okay? Now, a frame fucker is a director who's going to be there and is going to tell you, cut there, cut there, cut there, and they're going to micromanage the way that you cut, okay? And I used to do that, and I think that's a terrible strategy, okay? For me, now this is not, everything, by the way, that I'm saying here, you might disagree with everything I say, and that's completely right, you should do. I'm just giving you my experience, my point of view, my journey is going to be different to yours. You may want to be a frame fucker, it may work for you, that's okay. But I don't think it's a good strategy. Why? Because you should know, you know in your head, the way that you shot something and the solution that you intend, okay? So I know what that is, and that's something I can always return to. So what I like to do is I like to talk to an editor about different things. I don't want to talk to them about, I intended this shot, this was the mark, I wanted to open on this, then 5 seconds cut to this, do that. You know, I don't want to be prescriptive in that way, because I want them to surprise me, to delight me, to come up with different solutions. So I'll spend my time in advance talking to an editor about the things I've been talking to you about here, about what is the theme of the film, what's the subtext of the film, what am I trying to say, what is the mood, what is the atmosphere, what films is this like, who are the actors' performances, who do I like, who do I think is a bit weak, who are we going to have to help, who do we want to dominate in the screen, because you know, the way that you'd imagine the film and the way that it will be in the end are inevitably going to be different, because a film is written 3 times. It's written as a screenplay. It's written when you are shooting, and then it's written again in the cutting room. So I'd far rather that I give the stuff to the editor, I give them a general overview, they come up with their solution, and then I look at it, and hopefully there's something in it which is better than what I had wanted to do. It's important to leave your ego out of this, okay? You need to know what you want and know what you're trying to achieve, but don't just think automatically your solutions are better than someone else's solutions, yeah? Hire the best people you can, yeah? And collaborate them and make them do your will and feed their heads, but also recognize that they spend all of their time doing this. A DP every day they go to work is shooting. An editor every single day is cutting, yeah? Whereas you come in and out of these different things, and you have to go from the very beginning of coming up with an idea or developing an idea right to the end when you're screening it at a film festival. So only part of your job is that. Respect their profession, inspire them, make them want to do their best work, and have a look at what their solution is. And maybe it's better, or maybe it suggests something interesting. And if not, then you can say, let's try it this way. This is how I intended it. And then you've at least got 2 versions. And the other thing I'd say is ration your time in the cutting room, because what you have that you can offer is some objectivity. Yeah? And if after you've shot, you go away for a while, you let someone put something together, then you come back in. I think it's easier to see the big picture, and it's easier to give notes and to begin to make it better. If you've been in there and you're concentrating on micromanaging every individual cut within the film, then I think sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. Yeah? So it's good to be able to breathe a bit. The other thing to beware is that it's never as well, this is the saying, it's never as good as rushes, and it's never as bad as the first assembly, okay? The thing about rushes is that they're pure, it's like finding diamonds in a field or gold or something, and you know, you watch your rushes and it's great because it's just that one angle, that one shot, hopefully the actor is really good. The problems come when you start chopping these rushes up and you put it together. And of course, your first assembly, the first time you've put everything together, it's long, it's baggy, and of course it's terrible, because if it wasn't terrible, you wouldn't need, 10 weeks, say, on a feature film to cut it, yeah? It would, if you could just cut something and instantly it was good, then everyone would have a week to edit something. So that's, what you're seeing is all of your mistakes and everything that you did wrong and the things that don't work in the script, the performances that don't work, and often watching that first assembly can make you feel like shooting yourself, okay? But this is exactly normal, and you have to go through that pain barrier to then begin to do the violence to that needs to be done to your initial ideas for the film to grow and for you to grow. And the other thing I would say is that what you have to do is you have to direct what is there, okay? Not what you think is there, not what you want it to be there. And also be very careful. There's another reason it's good to listen to your editor is that, let's say a shot was very difficult to get. You had to get up at 3 in the morning. You had to drag all the equipment up to the top of this tall building to be there in time for the sunrise. The crew were moaning, it was freezing cold, it was really difficult to get that shot, but you got the shot and you're really happy. Then you're in the cutting room, and you will definitely, as a director, because it was so hard to get that shot, you're going to force that shot into the movie. That shot might be a scene, by the way, yeah? But you need an editor there to tell you, it's not very good, really, isn't it? Because they can judge, because they didn't get up at 5 in the morning. They didn't stand there freezing cold. They're just looking at what they have, okay? I would encourage all of you, when you make a film, in some sense, to throw away the script, yeah? And to make the film with what you have. I mean, I think that the best films, it's almost like drama in particular. Drama has to aspire towards being a documentary. It has to feel true and real and compelling and emotional. And so you have to respond to the best performance in the film, to the best shots in the film, to the best. And so what you have will be different to what you imagined. And if you can find a way to use the best material that you have, even if it means making a different film, the better. And I think an editor can help you with that because they can be objective. Don't fall into this trap, which is something that I think that came originally from Hitchcock. Hitchcock, there was this idea that everything was pre-cut, it was storyboarded. You just chopped off the clapperboard at the beginning, and you just cut before the director says cut, and you stick the shots together. It's not the way it works. I think it's a constant process of trial and error. I think the more different the finished film is to your original idea, probably the better, because it means that you're adaptable and that you're flexible and that you're pushing the film into what it wants to be. It's a bit like sculptors when they're tapping away at a piece of marble. They may have an idea what they want it to be, but the stone is stronger in certain places. It has a certain pattern in certain places. So you have to train yourself to look at what's really there. And I suspect that if you are in there cutting every single day, then maybe you won't see that. Now, obviously, it might be that as a student, you want to shoot your film yourself, you want to cut your film yourself, you don't have the resources to do all of that. I'm not saying never cut. I'm just saying as your career progresses and you can begin to afford collaborators, always get the best collaborators you can. And the other little trick I would say is you're not necessarily looking for the best person, okay? There will be a top camera person in this country. There will be a top editor in this country. They're not necessarily who you want. Craft skills are very important, but the other important thing is, will they listen to you? Do you like them? Can you get on? Do you make a good team? Sometimes it's better to have the third best person in the country who will listen to you and gets the story you want to tell, and together you'll make something good, rather than the best person in the country who thinks they're so great they never have to listen to you at all, okay? So I just encourage you to work with the best collaborators you can.
Very nice, Peter. All this lesson, you are a good teacher, really good.
Thank you.
Very well structured and very nice. Wow. Well, I'll have one question or remark, like to say. You have been crossing all of the work of the director's work, but you haven't talked yet how to work with the actors.
Yeah.
Your casting, how do you mentioned about psychology.
Yeah.
You know, could you
Yeah,
talk about
obviously
that?
I can talk a bit about that. I mean, the first thing to say is that I used to be a bit scared of actors, not as individuals, I know you're not scary, but in a workplace setting. Because I had come up, some directors come in from theatre, you know, and they work with actors every day, but I came in, you know, through editing, and then I made documentaries, so I hadn't really worked with actors that much. So to begin with, I used to hide behind my monitor and behind the technical, the technicalities. There's, oh, what's it? Anyway, a very famous British actor who's yeah, Gary Oldman, that's right. He says about actors are in the business of being liked, yeah? That's part of what drives them to want to do what they do. They need public approval. It's about putting yourself on show. And in the theatre, you have the whole audience that's there, okay? But on a movie set, on a TV set, you are the audience. So it's really, really important that you're there for them, okay? And you're the human, you're the front end of what can be, especially for a less experienced actor, a very alienating, mechanical process. And it can feel relentless, because it has to be relentless. We're setting up this shot, we're moving on to the next shot. So it's very, very important that you are the human face, that you interact with them. When they come onto the set in the morning, say hello to them, welcome them onto the set. When you arrive on the set, go to the makeup truck, see who's in there, say hello. Even if you don't feel like it because you're really stressed about the scene that you have in the day, it's going to pay enormous dividends. What I try and do is I try and create a safe space, maybe means something else, but you know, what I would call a safe space for actors, in that the actors turn up, and often, you know, they'll be there, they won't be in costume, they'll have maybe done a bit of makeup or something. And so what I do is I kick everybody out. So it's just me and the actors, okay? And then I will have had discussions beforehand with them about the bigger picture, yes? About who their character is, the role they play in the story, what the film is about, the kind of film I'm trying to make. I will have tried, rather than doing rehearsals, like theatre rehearsals, I'll have tried to have a series of discussions with as many of the actors as possible, so they understand what I'm trying to do. I can then understand the way they view the character. And any big disagreements, I hope that we get out of the way beforehand. Because the last thing I want is to be on the set where time is money and it's ticking away like this and having a big argument about a conception of a character. What I want to do is I want to be getting in each scene is like a jigsaw puzzle that that you have to solve. You're in a space, you've got some people who are going to be saying certain lines, performing certain actions, moving around, and you're going to have to shoot it within a certain amount of time. And so every scene you get onto is like doing a kind of weird crossword puzzle in a way. And I like to have time, and how long that time is depends on the complexity of the scene, with the actors, just me and the actors, and no one else. I don't let the DOP in there, don't let the first AD, because I want there to be a safe space with all of us where we can try things, and if they don't work out, we try something else, yeah? And it's because it can be quite emotionally revealing, this kind of work. It can be quite scary, I think, for people. So you want there to be this kind of communal space. And I like to see what it is that they want to do. So often I'll ask them, how do you want to do this? Yeah? Especially if we have time. Because there's the thing about actors is you can't just tell people what to do. Yeah? Or at least if you do, you're not going to get the best performance out of them. It would be like pinning a butterfly onto a board. You have to collaborate, you have to help them, you have to help them solve the problems, but they have to help you as well, because you've got to be able to shoot something in a certain way. So I spend an amount of time working with the actors, and a lot of it is not necessarily to do, I'm not looking at them acting in and of that moment. What I'm doing is I'm coming up with a kind of, well, blocking we call it, a kind of geography, yeah, that by moving actors around the space, I'm helping to interpret the scene or expose the inner drama of the scene. Because if I'm here talking to you, that's a very different dynamic to if I'm having the same conversation right here with you. And that movement on a certain sentence might be really important. And so, so movement can help. If I'm talking to you and I'm talking to you like this and I'm just doing it over my shoulder, that says something different. There's a whole array of different things you can do to make a scene that is potentially quite boring, very interesting. The most important thing I would say is always try to have movement in a scene. I don't like being rude about other people's films, so I won't tell you which film this is, but there was a quite successful first-time director, writer-director, who made a film, and a lot of the scenes were just these two people that are talking to each other. To me, that's soap opera. You can do so much. Cinema needs movement, yeah? And so even if there's only one point in your scene where people move, make people move. Don't have people sitting down just talking to each other. It's incredibly boring, and you're only using half of the resources that are at your disposal. Once I've come up with a certain basic movement around the room, I'll then invite the crew in to have a look at it, okay? So, and then I'll work out how to shoot it. I'll have been thinking about how to shoot it. I may even have a storyboard, but the worst thing in the world is to show the actor, this is a storyboard, I want you to start here, I want you to walk, you may get them to that point, but it's best, to be honest, to get them there by subterfuge than telling them. Now and again, when I run out of time and I've got a good relationship, I might say, first line here, second line there, go over and sit down. But it's much better to evolve something, and then it becomes a living, breathing, you have to create an event that is worth shooting. So it has to have emotion, has to have drama, has to have suspense. So you need to have in your head a really clear idea of what this scene is about, the psychology, the character development. There's a lot of levels in which you're looking at it. And some of this can be done with, like, let's say your intelligence, but a lot of it is just here. You have to get yourself in the zone. I mean, here it becomes very difficult to talk about it because it comes from practice. You do things, you don't necessarily know why you do them. But if you have watched films, and especially if you've watched films and analysed them, what I would encourage you to do is have a look at your favourite films. Don't just watch them as entertainment though. Watch a scene. Take a scene that you like. Have a look at the way that the director has moved people around the room. Why does an actor move at a certain point? Why do they turn away at a certain point? How might you have done this differently? This is a bit like what you were saying, sir, about different, different editor might come up with a completely different film, a different director. Any of us directing a scene, the same scene, would come at it a completely different way. So there's a combination of, you need to understand psychology, you need to understand storytelling, you need to make your actors feel loved, really loved and valued, because often actors that are, let's say, more sensitive than other people. There's a friend of mine who says that all actors, basically, their psychological development stopped at 8 years old. I think that's very rude. But I think that many of us who work in cinema are what my father would call special people, which he doesn't say it's not necessarily a positive thing. Sensitivity, empathy, these are qualities that are super important for a director. And actors are often super sensitive. That's why they're able to do the work that they can. I mean, learning how to direct actors is a lifetime's job. And what I would say is that there's, YouTube is your friend. There are many good tutorials out there on YouTube in terms of some of the technicalities of blocking and the rest of it. But the more time you spend with actors, understanding them, understanding the different methods and approaches. I mean, I've worked with Japanese actors, American actors, English actors, some people from a theatrical tradition. I worked with an actor who, it was the first film he'd done. He was a kabuki actor, and he'd spent all of his life dressed as a woman with this white face paint on, playing women. And the way that he approached his performance was completely different to Western actors who might approach it from a psychology. Let's say that they come from the inside out, yeah? The way that he approached it was completely to do with movement. He only understood his character. He was playing the Emperor of Japan. And what he did was he examined minutely newsreel footage of the Emperor of Japan, who had a certain walk. And he felt that once he mastered that walk, that he could understand the character. And so that's what he did. He spent all of his time practicing. And in the end, it was uncanny. He was able to turn himself into the Emperor. But there's many actors, certainly in the UK and America, who would never work like that. They would build from the inside outwards. So you have to understand an actor's process. The culture they come from might be really different. And a lot of filmmaking is about practicalities. One of the most difficult things is that actor number 1 is really good on take 1, and actor number 2 is really good on take 5. And how on earth do you put them together? But, you find strategies for that.
Well, thanks, Peter. Any more questions? Yeah, we have 2. Okay, we have only 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Students first. Students.
Hello, thank you for the speech. For me, it's more not a question, but it's like imagine 1 year from now we are together again,
Yeah,
and you give me a task to develop.
yeah.
What that would be for me?
What, do you mean a particular skill or something?
Yeah, for example, I want to be a director. I'm
Yeah.
trying to work for that.
Okay,
But my problem is basically is the message, to try to pass the message. And
Sure. I think let's approach this from two different ways, okay? The big and the small. In terms of the small, I would say stop watching things just for entertainment. Not that I want you to lead a miserable life, but start analysing why the things that you like work, okay? There's a particular TV, or what's a film that you like, or what's a TV show that you like? Anything.
for example, series,
Yeah, anything.
Dark.
Dark.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, have a look at Dark, okay? Find your favourite episode, yeah? And have a look at a scene in there and really understand the way that it works. Watch it 10 times, okay? Don't just watch it for entertainment, but analyse it and work out how does it have that effect on you, okay? Understand the lighting. Understand the mise en scène, by which I mean how actors move around a room. Understand how many camera positions are there and how it's shot. Look at the background action. Look at the colour, yeah? Break it down in every single different way you can. Think about this particular scene. What is it about on the surface, but what is it really about underneath, yeah? The more that you can hone your analytical skills and you can look at the things that you love and you can take them apart and put them back together again, then that's something that you can learn when you're at film school, obviously, but it's something you can do on your own all the time, you know. Don't just watch things for entertainment. I'm not saying never. Of course, go to the cinema, be thrilled and all the rest of it. But if there's something that you love, get it up on the dissecting table and analyse it, look at it from every single point of view, and then you will begin to understand how the people who put that together and why it works, and you will be able to steal those thoughts, those ideas, those approaches, and adapt them. Jean-Luc Godard, who, as you probably worked out, is a big hero of mine, which is, I even wear that hats he used to wear in 1962. But he said it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to, okay? All of us are influenced by other people. All of us steal, you know? And this has happened from the beginning of time, that everyone builds on everyone else's. But the more that you understand why something works, yeah, then the better you're going to be, because you begin to understand the details of the craft. And that comes from understanding a long story arc in a series, an individual episode, you know, sequences within an individual episode, so on and so forth. So you begin to understand the choices and why you make the choices. So that's on the micro level. On the macro level, start thinking about what is important to you. You need to have a point of view. And this point of view, you need to know what's going on in the world, yeah? I mean, so at the moment, we have this terrible news, the Ukraine crisis. You need to know what you think about it. You need to be informed. You need to know the history of why we've got to where we are. You know, you want to be actively engaged in the world. You need to understand why it is you like one particular filmmaker more than another. You need to understand what are the stories that you like, what are the stories you want to tell. You need to put yourself together as or begin to create yourself. If you want to be a director, I assume you want to be a director, yeah, then you have to turn yourself into someone who is going to be listened to, okay? Which means you have to grow as an individual, yeah? Which means you have to feed your head, which means you have to read, you have to watch, you have to think, you have to observe, you have to become, I don't mean this in a pervy sexual way, you have to become a voyeur. You have to understand the way people work around you, you have to understand yourself, okay? So there's very big work that you can do, and there's very small work you can do. And if there's certain things that you're like, it's like, oh, I'm not interested in art. Why aren't you interested in art? Maybe you're not looking at the right kind of art, you know. Telling stories with pictures is something that has been done for centuries. It's only recently been done as moving pictures. So there's a lot of work. It doesn't end, by the way. I mean, you know, this is my day-to-day life.
Time's up, Peter.
Okay.
One more question.
All right, last question.
Thank you. Talking about energy and the contrast of the energy, how does this influence your work? I'm talking about in the scene between actors, but
Yeah.
also between scenes.
Yeah. I mean, when you say energy, you're talking about about what exactly? Like human energy or? Yeah.
For
Yeah.
example, human energy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know. I think, listen, here's a very simple thing. This is the opposite to what I was saying last night. You were there last night. I was talking about the way that I slowed things down, which is counterintuitive in Pearl Eerie. Most of the time, I would say, especially to younger directors, about energy, is give the scene some energy, and if you can't think what to do, tell people to do it faster. Because sometimes something comes out, if you let everyone take their time and everything's a big speech and dramatic, it can actually turn something into very, very stodgy. Now, George Lucas, famously, on the first Star Wars film, which is probably his best film as a director. Well, actually, maybe not. Maybe THX. Never mind. THX. I think, yeah. No, anyway, we'll pass over that. That's another debate. That's not the point. Apparently, what his most common direction he would say to, you know, Carrie Fisher or Harrison Ford, faster, more intensity. And he is mocked for that. But actually, it's a really good direction, you know, because the moment when someone stops thinking about what they're doing and just does it faster. So that's a way in which you can use energy. And sometimes if you don't know what to do, you know, it can be quite good just to vary the pace in a scene, just to see what happens. But what you're trying to do is tap into individual actors' energy and to get them relaxed enough that they release who they really are, you know, and use your energy to lavish as much love, platonic love, I mean, love and affection on your actors as you can to make them feel valued. And the warmth of your human energy should unlock something fantastic from them.
Okay, Peter, thanks very much for your great energy. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Good
Thank
work.
you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Vamos ter agora coffee break. Dentro de 20 minutos retomamos. Até já. Obrigado.
No, whoa, careful.
Today, however, a very, very pleasant reading. 73 up in the Goodland area, 72 at Garden City, 70 reported by Dodge City and Liberal, 72 over by the good folks of Garden.
O Sophia 2022, que vai ser a 18 de junho no Casino Estoril, tem como tema a animação no cinema português e de falar-se um pouco sobre as 5 longas-metragens de animação que estão em preparação e que algumas delas vão ser já estreadas este ano. Começava por intercalar as perguntas que vamos fazer com algumas imagens. Por isso, Pedro, peço-te que passes as primeiras imagens, que têm a ver com filmes de Margarida Gil.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
E a sorte do rei acabou para sempre. Os deuses, disfarçados de velhos feiticeiros, vieram à Terra com o propósito de destronar Quetzalcoatl. Um dos feiticeiros quis falar com ele. Quetzalcoatl, sentado num trono resplandecente de pedras preciosas, recebeu o forasteiro dizendo-lhe: Filho, como estás e o que desejas?
Vimos imagens de 2 filmes e de uma curta, da Margarida, e eu passo a fazer um desafio de resposta, porque é o cinema no feminino em Portugal. Esta é uma questão que gostava de pôr, tanto mais que um deles, a última parte, é do filme Mar, que é um dos 5 apurados num concurso feito entre com a Netflix e a Academia Portuguesa de Cinema, em qual 5 longas-metragens de cineastas portuguesas vão ser vistos em mais de 100 países através da rede da Netflix. E por isso eu perguntava, Margarida, que tal esta experiência?
Eu há bocado estava a fazer uma aposta comigo mesma que me iriam perguntar que tal é ser uma mulher a fazer cinema. Eu devo dizer que esta pergunta me persegue desde que comecei a fazer cinema na televisão com 23 anos. Portanto, há muitos anos. Eu era uma jovem realizadora na RTP, com muita lata e sem medo nenhum, e tinha sempre equipas quase exclusivamente masculinas e nunca constituiu problema, mas provavelmente tem a ver com características de personalidade. Pelo contrário, sentia-me até... Eu não me importo de sentir que há uma certa generosidade protetora, nunca me fez confusão isso. A verdade é que consegui fazer praticamente sempre aquilo que quis, mas isso não me cega. Não é por isso que eu deixo de ver, para já que era uma exceção. Segundo, o difícil que foi sempre convencer que aquilo era meu. Era sempre apadrinhada por figuras tutelares, Manuel de Oliveira, João César, ainda agora isso persegue-me. Tudo o que faço é sempre por influência de este ou daquele. É muito difícil explicar, não, fui eu que escrevi, fui eu que fiz, fui eu que não sei o quê. Bom, eu já desisti de argumentar. A questão é muito mais complexa e eu penso que interessante, para além das cotas. Como veem, eu sou a única mulher aqui, já significa qualquer coisa, não é, Paulo? São coisas normais. Portanto, isso reflete a realidade. É muito menor a participação. Tem sido, eu penso que isso vai aos poucos ser estrutural, ser uma aposta com luta nossa, estrutural, paridade. Temos que lutar e a questão das cotas eu deixo para mais tarde, se quiserem conversar sobre isso, não me importo, não tenho nenhum preconceito. Mas a questão mais complexa é o olhar da mulher, que eu acho que é intrínseco, é natural que uma mulher projete o seu universo feminino, sei lá, o seu universo está sempre projetado. Está projetado na narrativa, na temática, na maneira como nós inconscientemente nos colocamos em todos os personagens, mas o ponto de vista muitas vezes assenta sobre o olhar de um outro veículo, que é uma mulher. A Maria de Medeiros, neste caso, quase sempre são mulheres, mas nem sempre. Já tive filmes em que o meu olhar era muito, talvez até esta curta que eu fiz, talvez o olhar meu seja muito mais do personagem masculino. E mais, há um argumento que eu sempre disse, eu tenho sempre que o repetir, que é, eu acho que há realizadores, homens, com um olhar muito mais feminino do que algumas mulheres cujo olhar, às vezes, é bastante identificável com qualidades que são muitas vezes atribuídas aos homens. E por isso a questão, felizmente, é complexa. Agora, que a delicadeza no pequeno gesto, na minúcia, um certo tipo de atenção, costumam ser qualidades que se identificam com o feminino. Caramba, há tantos homens que têm essa atenção, essa delicadeza, essa capacidade descritiva. Querem autor mais feminino que Bergman? É difícil. Há uma atenção interior e interiorizada sobre as questões relacionais, que é aquilo que interessa no meu cinema. É sempre à volta da relação homem-mulher, a procura da relação. Não é só... Eu vejo muita gente à minha volta que lida com a mesma temática. Claro que o ponto de vista necessariamente é diferente, e ainda bem. Vive la différence.
Queres falar sobre o filme e a Netflix?
Sim. Claro, eu fiquei contente. O meu percurso é da televisão para o cinema. Eu acho que fiz cinema na televisão, seriamente. Os documentários, as coisas que eu chamo experimentais são muito cinematográficas. Há um desejo de cinema logo nas primeiras coisas que eu fiz, que eu, aliás, acho graça. Mas o meu percurso é um bocado fora do comum, porque eu venho da televisão para o cinema. Só fiz a minha primeira longa no cinema, propriamente, quando senti que tinha alguma coisa para dizer. E essa alguma coisa era eu própria. Só nessa altura já eu tinha vivido alguma coisa, tinha 33, 32, também fui das primeiras. As pessoas perguntavam, mas porquê é que não concorre já? Foi genuíno da minha parte. Eu já trabalhava com a área. Portanto, para me exprimir, tinha outro meio. O cinema foi muito mais importante, como expressão individual e profunda de mim própria. Por isso, quando aparece este concurso da Netflix, achei graça porque é uma espécie de regresso a um universo que é muito mais próximo da televisão do que, apesar de passar cinema, mas claro que o meu contentamento, além de ter sido por ser escolhida e reconhecida e ter ficado muito agradecida, é aquilo que permite visibilidade, que é uma coisa que o meu cinema tem tido muito pouco, é visibilidade. E fiquei muito contente e agradeço imenso e tenho outros. Não foi o primeiro, porque houve um filme meu que fiz para Lisboa 94, que foi para Filmino. Foi a Luz Incerta. Mas eu espero que outros filmes tenham essa aventura, essa sorte de serem vistos. Caramba! Aquela pergunta, vocês só fazem filmes sem ser para o público, é tão estúpida que me irrita. É melhor eu não ficar irritada, porque eu sou muito brutal. É claro, para nós os filmes serem vistos, não se discute. É um facto. É tão trabalhoso fazer um filme, fazer um programa, fazer uma série. Sai-nos do pelo, uma curta, como eu agora fiz, tal e qual, como se fosse uma longa. Sai-nos do pelo totalmente, desgasta-nos. É preciso pôr-nos todos inteiramente lá dentro. Que achar que depois, não, estão distintas se é visto ou não. Por favor, ninguém acredita nisso.
Ainda sobre o cinema no feminino, algum de vocês quer dizer uma palavra?
Eu acho que a Margarida já disse tudo, que se fôssemos acrescentar não era nada.
Tiago, quer dizer alguma coisa?
Ou seja, em relação a esse tema em si, eu acho que é uma pena que esse tema ainda exista. Eu acho que é fundamental que as visões sejam várias e de todas as frentes. E acho que só vamos evoluir mesmo quando isto deixar de ser um assunto. Até lá, acho que é muito importante. Acho que é mesmo importante estarmos a combater para que isto deixe de ser um assunto. Mas de resto não tenho mesmo.
É uma coisa, meio minuto. Eu acho que mais importante, no meu caso especial, mais importante do que fazer um filme, ser uma mulher a fazer um filme, ter sido sempre o meu trabalho, ter um tema recorrente que é o ser uma mulher do interior. O ter vindo de uma pequena cidade de província, industrial, com características muito de luta de classes muito importante, o ter vindo dali, daquele meio, o ter estado no colégio de freiras e depois enfrentar toda a divisão de classes que a cidade de têxtil da Covilhã é um espelho, o vir do interior foi muito mais importante, acho eu, para mim, do que o facto de ser mulher.
Olá. Talvez quisesse acrescentar uma coisa. Eu, por exemplo, eu fui criado pela minha irmã, mais do que a minha mãe, então foi sempre uma mulher muito presente na minha vida, e ela é fotógrafa, e eu acompanhei sempre a luta dela, de uma mulher talentosíssima, mas era das poucas fotógrafas em Portugal, e a luta que ela teve para conseguir vingar e mostrar a sua arte enquanto fotógrafa no mundo completamente dominado pelos homens. E nós todos estamos aqui, e o facto de estarmos aqui sentados, a ver só a Margarida aqui sentada, é reflexo exatamente de quem sempre controlou a narrativa na nossa sociedade, foram os homens. E nós, enquanto cineastas, é muito importante não deixarmos que isso aconteça, ou fazermos com que isso deixe de ser o mainstream, portanto, o normal, não é? Serem os homens a controlarem a narrativa e o cinema, de facto, poder possibilitar ter múltiplas vozes, e seja do interior, seja urbano, seja mulher, seja homem, seja velho, seja novo. É muito importante haver essas várias vozes a falar. E por último, quero dizer às jovens realizadoras ou aspirantes a realizadoras que estão aqui, que surgiu em Portugal a MUTIM, que é a Associação de Mulheres do Audiovisual. Portanto, inscrevam-se e lutem pelo que é suposto ser vosso de direito.
Só para informar que foi feito um estudo sobre as mulheres no cinema no universo ibero-americano, com a colaboração da Academia Portuguesa de Cinema, que fez a área portuguesa. Saiu no Dia da Mulher e será também publicada no site e no Facebook da Academia em breve. Passávamos agora, Pedro, ao segundo spot do filme.
Vá lá! João, queres dançar comigo?
Acho que não.
Queres? Vá lá!
We have a KGB agent inside Raret. We have to find and eliminate him.
E sobre o desaparecimento da Mia, sabes mais alguma coisa? Tenta descobrir.
The embassy suspects Nia is not who she claimed to be.
Se a Mia for uma desertora, também nos pode comprometer a todos. Descobre o que os americanos sabem.
João, eu percebo que tu te envolvas com estas pessoas. Há um objetivo maior. E nada pode pôr em perigo esse objetivo.
Okay. Imagens da Herdade e do Glória, que temos connosco o Tiago. E a pergunta era exatamente a complementaridade hoje em dia da atividade de um realizador, não é de cinema, é cinema, é séries e também até filmes de publicidade e documentários, se isso for necessário. Isto para percebermos que um realizador se pode desdobrar nessas atividades. Portanto, eu pedia-te...
E teatro também. Ou seja, eu acho que... Eu sempre fui... Para falar exatamente sobre isso, eu sempre fui muito curioso em relação... Está a fazer aqui sempre fui muito curioso em relação a vários aspectos deste nosso meio, porque eu fui parar ao cinema através da publicidade. No entanto, o meu objetivo primário foi sempre o cinema, só que achei sempre uma enorme dificuldade para lá chegar e então fiz um desvio. Ao mesmo tempo, descobri os atores quando consegui finalmente chegar à ficção e apaixonei-me pelos atores e pela sua forma de estar e pela sua arte, e isso levou-me ao teatro, de alguma forma também, e então acabei por ir lá parar. Portanto, eu não me consigo... Eu estou agora numa fase em que, de facto, estou a disparar nas várias direções, mas tive muito tempo sem filmar cinema, e com alguma pena, mas foi um facto, e agora voltei com mais força ao audiovisual e estou a fazer uma pausa no lado teatral. Mas isto para dizer que eu não tenho essa definição muito concreta em mim, em termos de cinema, televisão, o que for. Eu quero estabelecer contacto com as pessoas, através seja lá do que for, do que estamos a fazer. Mas penso que é isso. Mais alguma coisa que tenhas dito?
Não, eu agora já
sim.
Estou a ouvir...
Sim. Os outros que também...
também estão dentro desta... Não sei,
O que é suposto eu dizer? Falar do trabalho do Tiago é isso, outro de fora. Mas que é muito bom, gosto muito. Mas agora com estas plataformas todas tem surgido a possibilidade de fazer este tipo de trabalho, seja televisão, cinema, dispararam, não é? E acho que estamos todos aqui numa nova fase, como a Margarida estava a dizer, do filme dela que agora vai para a Netflix, o Tiago teve a Glória e muitos mais virão. E eu acho que isso é uma oportunidade, e agora virando aqui a conversa para quem precisa, e é mais uma possibilidade de todos estes miúdos novos, alguns não tão novos, mas novos, de começarem a apontar para aí e, acima de tudo, começarem a... Eu estava a ouvir o Peter a falar há bocado, e ele estava a dizer uma coisa muito engraçada, que hoje em dia pode filmar com o telefone. E eu acho que é isso que vocês podem pensar todos, é começar a filmar com aquilo que tiverem à mão, e porque de repente verem a vossa narrativa, a vossa história está à distância de um clique. Nós, para chegar a esta altura, não é? Como estamos agora a viver isto das plataformas que eu estava a dizer, foi muito diferente. Não havia a democratização das câmaras que há hoje, por exemplo. Era muito difícil filmar. Nós somos do tempo da película, acho eu sou. Eu sou o mais novo. Mas é isso que vocês têm de fazer, é tentar fazer coisas que vos façam felizes, que gostem, que se identifiquem e que tenham orgulho, e a partir daí as coisas vão ser muito mais fáceis, vão chegar a estas Netflix, ao cinema, E quando chegar aqui à altura, o Paulo há de falar comigo, eu hei de falar um bocadinho do percurso, depois de ver as imagens. Vou passar aqui ao João Nuno.
A primeira coisa que eu posso dizer assim sejam mais espertos que eu e não ouçam o vosso pai. No meu caso, eu ouvi e não fui estudar cinema, porque ele achou, mas o que é que vais fazer? Vais viver de subsídios? E eu, na altura, acreditei. E, na altura, era muito inocente e achava que sim. Não fazia sentido nenhum viver de apoios do Estado para conseguir trabalhar. E então segui aquilo que eu sabia fazer, que estava mais ligado ao desenho e à arte. Só que o bichinho estava lá dentro e demorou. E com 28 anos eu disse, não, eu quero mesmo fazer isto. E fui procurar, e já estava a trabalhar e fui procurar fazer. Só que, entretanto, com essa idade eu já trabalhava em publicidade, tal como o Tiago, e demorou muito tempo. E, obviamente, quando eu comecei a realizar, quem me abriu as portas foi exatamente a publicidade, porque eu já trabalhava em publicidade. E demorou muito tempo a conseguir ter credibilidade dentro do meio do cinema, que acreditasse em mim como cineasta e não como realizador de publicidade, que era uma coisa que também lutaste contra isso. Nós ficamos depois com etiquetados com aquilo que fazemos, não é? E há sempre um grande preconceito, tanto das várias áreas em relação às outras áreas, que eu acho que felizmente agora as coisas começam a estar mais diluídas e as pessoas começam a entender que há mais esse cruzamento e temos todos a ganhar, e o cinema é muito mais rico e interessante quando há vozes diferentes a falar e a fazer coisas diferentes. Porque em Portugal sempre houve esta questão do que é o cinema português, e o cinema português tinha uma cara, tinha um estilo e tinha não é, supostamente e hoje em dia, eu acho que estamos mais livres dessas amarras e dessa visão. Portanto, aquilo que eu vos digo é assim, lutem pelos vossos sonhos e não desistam.
Okay. Eu acho que o João Nuno está a dizer, eu distinguiria duas coisas. Por um lado, o de se etiquetar muito facilmente é muito provinciano, é muito português e é nocivo e eu também acho que há uma certa leveza agora em não se etiquetar uma pessoa que vem da publicidade ou que vem da televisão como entrar pela porta do cavalo ou uma porta mais baixa, menos nobre. Por outro lado, e isso também tem a ver com uma certa variedade nos formatos. O estar, hoje em dia, fazendo parte da modernidade, os formatos híbridos, haver uma maior liberdade no próprio cinema, na própria linguagem do cinema. Eu penso que isso tem sido um dos traços do cinema moderno e é muito importante. Agora, no que o João Nuno disse, para mim, há um fator que eu não valorizo tanto, que é a perda de identidade possível, temível e que pode muito bem acontecer do cinema português. Eu não acho vantagem nenhuma nisso. Acho, pelo contrário, tudo isto que estamos a valorizar deve ir a par da consciência de que temos algo de precioso. É a minha convicção. E essa coisa esquisita, singular, que tem sido a marca do cinema português, era bom que não desaparecesse, que não fosse como é que se chama aquele bicho que está da malcata? Sim, até já uma pessoa já se esquece do nome. É claro que é esquisito, é claro que é desequilibrado, é claro que muitas vezes vai a contraciclo do gosto do público, mas isso é bom sinal. O grande perigo é tornar-nos iguais a tudo o que se faz e tudo no chamado universo audiovisual empurra para isso, para uma indiferenciação de tudo, até das caras dos atores. Cada vez é mais difícil encontrar alguém. Eu, como venho como disse, da província, quando vejo uma cara, mesmo cara, eu fico, que já tinha saudades. As caras, tudo está a ficar tão igual que a nossa expressão tende também para essa igualdade que é indiferenciação. Portanto, no que estavas a dizer, eu estou de acordo que é preciso tornar a coisa flexível, não termos preconceitos, a publicidade pode ser genial, quer dizer, mas a gente sabe que também se adquire muitos vícios, como nas séries. A atitude religiosa, sectária, de guardar o cinema como o tal bicho da Malcata, parece-me também ridículo e os dois extremos são perigosos. Por isso, sou absolutamente a favor da diversidade e de alguém que consiga surpreender, que seja tão livre, que está-se nas tintas para as fronteiras e consiga surpreender. É por aí que nós devemos ir.
Só ia acrescentar mesmo que é aí que eu acho que essa singularidade do nosso cinema, e é cada vez mais rara a nível mundial, é uma liberdade absoluta, que eu acho que existe cada vez menos, e acho que sim, que temos que cuidar do nosso lince enquanto deixamos surgir outras coisas também, mas eu acho mesmo muito importante e sinto mesmo isso cada vez mais quando trabalho fora e procuro investimento fora. Percebemos que nós temos uma liberdade criativa, autoral, que muitos poucos países o proporcionam, e eu acho que isso é de louvar, ao contrário e percebo a questão mesmo de, às vezes andam de costas voltadas com o público, mas o público não pode ser tudo, e eu acho que tem muita importância, e acho que isso depende de cada realizador, que tipo de contacto é que quer estabelecer, mas acho que é mesmo importante protegermos uma singularidade que é muito nossa.
Deixa-me só dizer uma coisa que lembraste numa frase do Aquilino Ribeiro, que é, se o escritor corre atrás do público, é corrido às pedradas. À pedrada. É uma frase radical. Mas só termino. Eu estou a ocupar o território dos meus colegas masculinos, não sei se estão a ver. É isso que devem fazer. Não foi de propósito. Não, eu só queria dizer que fiz agora uma curta que nasceu de um sonho. Literalmente, tive um sonho tão extraordinário, tão extravagante, tão inexplicável, não houve nada que o tivesse justificado, que decidi fazer uma produtora para ser totalmente fiel. Claro, concorri a uma curta que não é nada a minha forma de expressão. Fiz uma curta que me deu um trabalho, porque também fui produtora. Não ganhei um tostão, até agora suspeito que não vou ganhar nada, mas o filme que lá está é exatamente a forma mais livre possível. O sonho que eu tive está ali.
Então agora iríamos ver o terceiro excerto com filmes de João Nuno Pinto, filmes e séries. E formulava já uma relação que houve aqui já, que falou a Margarida, que é as caras no cinema português. E o Mosquito, por exemplo, revela-nos, de facto, uma cara diferente. E, aliás, que está num dos filmes que está nomeado ao Sophia Estudante, que é o Pancada, e que nos revela, de facto, exatamente uma cara. E, por outro lado, também, vocês falaram-nos sobre as relações. Margarida falou que fez uma produtora específica para o filme. As relações dos realizadores com os produtores, e até com os atores e com os outros agentes, mas especialmente com os produtores, que muitas vezes são quem tem o diálogo que vai dar à própria existência do filme. Portanto, passávamos o excerto do João Nuno Pinto.
Unidos! Eu não era sem tempo. Capitão Franco, 31ª Companhia. Onde é o molho de desembarque? O molho está aqui mesmo. E aqui mais. Primeiro Sargento, dê ordens para o desembarque.
Pessoal, atenção! Tudo a saltar para cima dos pretos e agaçar as caraminhas! Vai tudo! Cima da gente! Vai, Zacarias, tens ali um para ti! Vai, salta por dele!
Vítor, que história é esta do miúdo do jardim? Não consigo falar com o David, eu não sei dele.
Tem calma. Não, o quê? Não, eu vou lá. Vai para o tribunal. Já falo. Não vais dar até aqui. Eu estou a chegar. Não é no jardim, é na morgue. Vai para o tribunal, vai trabalhar. Assim que sobrar alguma coisa, já... Espera aí.
Oh, Ana! Vítor! Oh, Ana, tem calma, não deve ser ele.
Já identificaram o corpo? Não, ainda não. Vai a correr? Vim pelo jardim.
O médico legista está no bar. O médico legista está no bar. É que ele saiu agora para almoçar. Sim, só ele é que tem a chave.
É? Merda de terra, pá. Está no bar agora. Estou, querida, desculpa lá. Já te ligo.
As caras e as relações com a produção.
As caras e as relações com a produção. As caras, começando, não sei, eu concordo completamente com a Margarida quando ela estava a dizer eu procuro uma cara nova, uma cara marcante, uma cara diferente. Eu acho que de facto, e o que estavas a falar, há uma tendência no nosso mercado para pasteurizar tudo, não é? A imagem, os conceitos, o que é que vende, principalmente porque vivemos num mercado completamente capitalista e o dinheiro é que manda e as vendas é que mandam e supostamente o público é que manda, porque o público tem a ver com as vendas. Portanto, nós estamos presos ao dinheiro e ao supostamente os produtores, pronto, agora posso falar dos produtores aqui, estão presos a essa dinâmica. E aqui sim, nós temos, felizmente em Portugal, essa liberdade para fazermos aquilo que nós acreditamos, porque trabalhamos com pouquinho, com muito pouco dinheiro. O facto de trabalharmos com pouco dinheiro, e é o dinheiro do Estado, do ICA, ou da RTP, ou seja, o que tiverem a fazer, o facto de termos pouco dinheiro permite-nos ter mais liberdade. Quanto mais dinheiro tivermos para fazer uma produção, menos liberdade vamos ter, porque vamos começar a ter que fazer concessões e a fazer amarras. Por exemplo, eu aprendi muito no América, o primeiro clipe que vocês viram foi do América, e aprendi muito, foi a minha primeira longa, e no América eu ainda queria fazer tudo. Ou seja, tudo aquilo que não me deixaram fazer durante anos e anos e anos, e de repente eu tive a oportunidade de fazer, eu queria fazer tudo, e pôr tudo lá. No final do América, e com o América eu aprendi que a coisa mais valiosa que eu podia aprender e podia lutar era o tempo. Ter tempo. E então era preferível ter menos, e exigir menos, e ter menos coisas, e menos cenas, e ter esse luxo que é o tempo. Aquilo que o Peter Weber estava a falar há pouco, que é num set de filmagens, estamos sob pressão, temos que decidir, temos 10 minutos para terminar, temos que fazer avançar e assim, se nós conseguimos que esses 10 minutos não sejam 10 minutos, mas sejam 20, é um luxo incrível e é preferível ter 20 minutos e 100 figurantes e 0 figurantes do que 10 minutos e 20 figurantes. Metaforicamente falando, não é? Mas dos meios. Mas é a coisa mais preciosa que nós temos, é o tempo. Por exemplo, quando foi o Mosquito, foi o que eu estava a fazer um filme de guerra em África, um filme de época de guerra em África. É o pesadelo de qualquer produtor e de qualquer produção, como fazer isso. Mas desde o início, desde a escrita, eu sabia que eu queria despojar o filme do máximo de elementos externos ao personagem principal, que era o Zacarias. Eu queria me concentrar e ter o máximo de tempo com ele. para fazer esta viagem e usar o mais quase documental, não é? Com situações pontuais que eu precisava de produzir e ter uma grande produção, como é o caso deste desembarque. Demorou o desembarque, vocês estavam a ver que, para quem não viu o filme, que acredito seja a maioria, é uma cena que é plano único, que começa com o Zacarias e o barco, e de repente vemos este soldado a vir com estes africanos, com estes locais lá, desde lá do fundo da praia, porque o que aconteceu na altura é que os barcos não conseguiam chegar, porque a maré baixa, aquilo fica tipo 2 km de maré baixa até chegar à praia. E o barco encalha, e eles estavam cheios de soldados, e não havia, e então a única forma, e isto é real, era eles serem levados às cavalitas dos negros, que eram tratados como escravos, embora não houvesse escravatura. Então era uma cena muito complicada, porque era plano único, com barcos na água. Eles tinham que vir lá do fundo da praia a pé, pela água, vir. Chegavam aqui, punham os soldados às cavalitas e voltavam outra vez para a praia pela água. Era uma cena super exigente, psicologicamente, fisicamente, tudo. Em plano único, ou seja, falhava uma coisa, tínhamos que repetir tudo. Demorámos um fim de semana todo a fazer essa cena, porque é a cena da abertura do filme. Mas pronto, tirando estas cenas que de facto são importantes e que são marcantes, assim, tenham o mais tempo possível com aquilo que é realmente importante no filme e terem o resto, não interessa. Obviamente vocês vão perceber isso com o tempo e com a experiência, não vão conseguir fazer isso logo, mas é uma coisa que eu acho que é importante. Em relação às caras, por exemplo, o Zacarias. O Zacarias, e esta história é baseada na história do meu avô, e o meu avô era um homem grande, enorme. Eu nunca o conheci, que ele já tinha falecido quando eu nasci, há muito tempo, mas ele era de facto era o verdadeiro patriarca. Sabes? Havia muitas histórias dele e era este homem grande. E quando eu comecei a fazer o casting, eu estava à procura do Zacarias que eu tinha na cabeça, que era o meu avô, que era exatamente esta bizarra. E aparece-me o João Nunes no casting ainda, eu só estava a ver, eu não tinha o conhecido, era só o diretor de casting, que era o Ricardo Moura que estava a fazer, e de todos os jovens, eu vejo o João Nunes e eu fico assim, é este, porque ele tinha de facto uma presença, uma coisa assim incrível, espetacular. E o Ricardo, tipo, mas olha, tenho que dizer, porque ele é muito pequenino. Ele é pequenino, ele é franzino, mas quando eu digo pequenino, é realmente pequenino. E eu, tipo, não, mas é incrível, mas ele distingue-se dos outros, claramente. É incrível, tenho que o conhecer. Fui conhecê-lo e fizemos um recast. E de facto, eu alterei a história para poder encaixar o João Nunes no filme. Portanto, essa busca, ou como o Fellini fazia, que depois via no metro, não é, à procura de caras para os seus filmes. Eu acho que não temos que estar presos a nada, sabe? A criatividade e o processo de fazer um filme começa na escrita, mas temos que estar abertos ao que a vida, ao que o universo nos dá, não é? Ao que nos vai trazendo, e temos que saber olhar para as coisas e abraçá-las e alterar e corrigir. E em relação aos produtores, é uma relação tramada que vocês vão ter. porque é isso, nós enquanto contadores de histórias, queremos, lá está, queremos dominar a narrativa, não queremos contar a nossa história, queremos fazer, e de repente estamos nas mãos percebemos que não dominamos nada. E estamos nas mãos de outros e na vontade de outros e então a única coisa que eu digo é arranjem alguém que se mexe muito bem e que vocês confiam e que sentem que a pessoa que está a produzir acredita no projeto, acredita em vocês e principalmente também a seguir o filme não vai ficar na gaveta. Tem os contactos e sabe-se mexer para que o filme entre em festivais, seja visto e tenha visibilidade, que é uma coisa muito, muito importante. Não serve de nada a boa vontade e fazer-se, depois não há essa capacidade.
Querem falar sobre essa parte?
sobre a relação. Não, eu acho que eu vou pegando aqui no assunto dos produtores, eu acho que há uma coisa que está diretamente ligada, que tem a ver com o dinheiro, com o que falámos há pouco, ou seja, muitas desses problemas, quer dizer, isto depois também amplifica, não é? Quem tiver muito dinheiro vai ter os mesmos problemas vezes 1000, mas o facto de nós termos pouco faz com que seja muitas vezes muito complicado conseguir os tais meios mais técnicos para conseguirmos, ainda por cima, eu e o João Nuno estamos habituados que em publicidade temos esses luxos todos com alguma facilidade. Cada vez menos, sim, tivemos em tempos, mas depois fazer essa transposição para o cinema é completamente irrealista. Portanto, há ali uma nova aprendizagem que temos que ter produtores que consigam perceber, às vezes, as reais necessidades. Mas eu acho que o João Nuno, quando falou no tempo, é o assunto principal. Eu acho que essa é a grande luta, é o tempo. Em cinema tenho tido muita liberdade, no que diz respeito às séries também, quando trabalho com a RTP não tenho sido, mesmo com a Netflix, que pensei que iria haver uma intervenção muito mais presente em vários setores, eu não me posso queixar de imposições, claro que há muito mais controle, há muito mais preocupação, há uma preocupação muito grande de estarem a trabalhar para um público muito vasto, que eles sabem à partida o que vão fazer, mas nós também já partimos para esse assunto com essa preocupação. Portanto, eu não sei se estou a responder nada do que diz respeito à relação aos produtores, mas é isto, ou seja, eu acho que está tudo muito ligado ao dinheiro. As oportunidades hoje em dia são muito maiores, são de facto, só que ao mesmo tempo é muito assustador o que eu tenho percebido, é o que se procura, não é a imitação do que já existe. Eu acho que o que se vai furar, o que consegue chamar a atenção, eu acho que é por duas fases. Tem uma fase em que é uma reprodução dos sucessos e depois há uma que é as inovações que saltam daí. E essas é que são as mais difíceis. Mas eu acho que essas é que são as mais apetecíveis. Agora, para aí ninguém tem assim grandes fórmulas. Eu acho que é mesmo ir fazendo, ir acreditando muito no que se faz e acreditar que há maneiras diferentes de contar histórias, maneiras diferentes. Hoje em dia temos as plataformas, e já não falo só do streaming, temos a net, temos tudo, os formatos estão a mudar, há séries de 10 minutos, duração de 10 minutos, que são coisas impensáveis. Eu reagi sempre muito mal quando me disseram que iam existir séries com esse formato. Eu achava, mas isso é um absurdo. Fui surpreendidíssimo ao ver uma série que se chama State of the Union, que tem um conceito maravilhoso e são episódios de 10 minutos e não deixa de ser profundo e não deixa de ser... Portanto, eu acho que agora é perceber exatamente estes buraquinhos todos. Há muitos anos atrás havia só uma ou duas formas de fazer. Agora há demasiadas, que às vezes também é assustador. Acho que às vezes também são demasiados caminhos para se furar. Mas eu acho que a melhor forma de tentar entrar neste mercado vasto é conseguir chamar a atenção para algo novo. Porque eu acho sinceramente que os formatos... Eu acho que Portugal tem capacidade para fazer tudo, mesmo. Temos técnicos, temos talento para fazer tudo. E estarmos... Se entrarmos numa forma só de reprodução e perdendo a tal singularidade, acho que não vai existir um grande furo de oportunidade. Eu acho que tem que haver... para mim, o meu sonho era que conseguíssemos fundir essa tal singularidade, mas com popularidade. Pronto, porque é difícil essa ponte. Mas eu acredito que é uma possibilidade. Pronto, não sei para onde é que fui, mas...
Foste muito bem. Porque uma das coisas, eu, produtor, me confesso, que estava curioso em saber as vossas relações com os produtores, não é? E é uma questão que um dia sequer também haverá. Este ano é dedicado à realização, por isso eu nem me quero ir muito mais longe. Mas agora, fala tu.
Tanto faz. Eu estava aqui a ouvir o papel do produtor. Eu às vezes sou o meu próprio produtor e sou realizador, e não há pior coisa do mundo que produzir e realizar ao mesmo tempo. Porque me estou sempre a castrar, prefiro que seja alguém a produzir em vez de ser eu a produzir. Mas eu acho que o papel do realizador, que é isso que estamos aqui a falar, numa produção, é um jogo de cedências sempre com o produtor. Os realizadores estão sempre a ceder, da mesma maneira que os produtores estão sempre a ceder. O que eu acho é que tem que ceder, porque se não cederem, então se calhar tenho tido mais sorte. Porque eu acho que se não houver cedências de parte a parte, é muito difícil chegar a acabar um filme, uma série ou o que quer que seja. E eu como realizador, acho que o meu trabalho, apesar de ser o que eu mais gosto de fazer, não acho que seja o mais importante de todos. Eu acredito mesmo no espírito de equipa, acredito mesmo que todos os trabalhos são importantes. O trabalho do produtor é tão importante como o trabalho do realizador, do diretor de fotografia, da diretora de arte. Tudo é importante. E só com esse trabalho de equipa é que podemos chegar a bom porto e apresentar um bom projeto, um bom filme ou uma boa série. Eu, como se calhar sou mais sonhador, acredito na boa relação de toda a gente e na boa relação do produtor com o realizador. Eu tenho tido mesmo boas experiências. Já tive mais, mas muito poucas. Porque acho que também aprendi com o tempo a ceder mais. E a ceder não quer dizer que eu esteja a perder qualidade naquilo que vou fazer. Eu às vezes faço com que as outras pessoas sintam que são muito importantes e que aquilo que eles estão a dizer é a coisa mais importante e que eu estou a ceder em tudo. E o que eu estou a dizer é exatamente esse jogo de agora vou ceder, agora não vou ceder, mas vou dar a ideia de que ele é que está a ter ideia. É um jogo mesmo difícil. E só para falar aqui nas caras, eu por acaso tenho graça, eu nunca ando à procura de uma cara. Eu ando sempre muito mais à procura de corações, porque às vezes as caras de corações, porque acho que às vezes que as caras podem ser perfeitas, mas podem não nos dizer rigorosamente nada. Por isso às vezes é muito melhor daquilo que está atrás das caras do que aquilo que elas nos mostram.
Margarida, quer dizer alguma coisa sobre as relações com os produtores, ou é melhor não dizer? Ok. Então, iríamos agora ver então um último trecho do Sérgio Graciano, que tem a ver muito não só com o futuro, ou seja, de certa maneira é uma série que está a passar neste momento na RTP e um filme que vai estrear dentro de dias quase. E isto, para depois fazermos uma pergunta, é que numa altura tão paradoxal e crucial como esta, em que as salas de cinema estão numa crise extraordinária, perceber e o futuro de vocês, que estão a acabar os cursos. Já percebemos que há muitas plataformas e hipóteses de trabalho em diferentes categorias do cinema, de expressão, em televisão, em cinema, nas séries, portanto, o futuro é que vos espera numa altura tão crucial. Mas agora íamos ver então do Sérgio Graciano.
Arranja umas calças para este senhor e uma camisa lavada para o Dr. Rui Patrício.
E você, quem é?
Capitão Salgueiro Maia, venho receber a vossa rendição. Por favor, preparem-se para abandonar as instalações.
E avança. Tu, Tiago, avança. Vou com o Tiago? Vai, bora, Tiago, bora.
Incomoda-me, não sei o que me incomoda.
começava pelo Sérgio. Aliás, vimos aí as dificuldades que deve ter havido para para a realização do filme. Não é?
Bom, o filme foi o primeiro filme a ser rodado depois da primeira pandemia. Foi 15 dias depois. Não podíamos ter figurantes, quase. Foi assim muito difícil de fazer. Foi super. Fizemos um filme mais em cima do Salgueiro Maio, também por necessidade, do Tomás Alves, porque foi mesmo uma época muito difícil de máscaras, de gel, de polícia nos nossos decors, sempre a ver se estávamos a cumprir tudo. Não foi nada fácil, parecia que estávamos a viver uma ditadura. Mas pronto, já passou. Nada mais a propósito estar a fazer o Salgueiro Maio. Mas este filme foi um filme particularmente difícil de fazer para mim, por causa do peso dessa figura histórica que era o Fernando Salgueiro Maia, porque eu queria ser o mais apartidário possível como ele foi, mas por outro lado é sempre difícil, quando somos realizadores, sermos totalmente isentos. E esse foi o meu grande dilema para contar esta história. Quis estar num espaço completamente cinzento e tentar fazer o filme mais justo para esta personagem, que era o Fernando Salgueiro Maia, que nos diz respeito tanto e foi talvez o nosso maior herói de sempre e que já merecia ter um filme há mais anos, não agora. Puxando aqui um bocadinho atrás, aqui para a Rainha e Bastarda, que estreou agora na RTP, é muito difícil fazer coisas em Portugal, mesmo. Eu estava há bocado a falar com o Tiago, esta série foi feita, só para terem um bocadinho, perceberem, com o João Tovar, só para perceberem, esta série é uma série de 8 episódios, com batalhas, com cavalos, com princesas, com castelos, com viagens a Marvão, a Sintra. Foram 8 episódios feitos em 6 semanas. É mesmo muito depressa, e eu não queria ter feito assim, só que contingências da produção fizeram com que isto tivesse que ser mais depressa, lá está o tempo outra vez e o dinheiro. Mas é muito importante nós tentarmos pelo menos contar as nossas histórias e construir um público. Eu vou aqui rebobinar um bocadinho a conversa e agir, diversificarmos e não ficarmos fechados num género e tentar atacar para muitos sítios, manter a nossa identidade, naturalmente concordo absolutamente, mas também tentar ver outras coisas, filmes de género, filmes de terror, filmes fantásticos, e nós temos muita essa dificuldade em Portugal de haver quem faça. Eu sei que há muita gente com estas ideias e são ideias ótimas, eu também as tenho, porque sou meio geek também, não parece, mas sou, e também gostava muito de contá-las. Eu, quando era novo, eu sou da Zona da Graça, de Lisboa, criado e nascido, e havia um clube de vídeo ao pé da minha casa. E quando nós íamos alugar um filme, tirávamos, eu sou do tempo de VHS, série VHS, tirávamos assim um papelinho da caixa e a caixa dizia, o papelinho dizia o género do filme. Ou era ação, ou era comédia, ou era thriller. E nos filmes portugueses, que eu faço questão de ver, o género era português. Isto quer dizer muito para o bem e para o mal do nosso cinema. Para o bem e para o mal. Por isso, compete-nos a nós e a vocês, acima de tudo, que nós já somos mais entradores, tentar mesmo fazer aquilo que acreditam, e mesmo que ninguém acredite naquilo que vocês mostram, vocês têm que tentar fazer, por amor de Deus, não esperem pelo subsídio. Eu sei que ninguém come se não vier o subsídio, se não vier, temos que comer o que tiver de ser, mas não desistam dos vossos sonhos, por amor de Deus. Agarrem num telefone, filmem, porque alguém vai reparar em vocês e no vosso trabalho. E isso é o mais importante, é trabalharem com essa paixão de querer fazer, de mostrar e valorizar o cinema português.
Futuro.
Não, eu acho que neste momento estamos a viver uma época, de facto, de uma grande crescimento e oportunidade no audiovisual português. Há muita coisa a acontecer. De facto, os cinemas podem estar em crise, as salas estão vazias, que é preciso enchê-las, mas há muito trabalho a ser feito e sem dúvida que as séries vieram ocupar muito desse espaço. Em Portugal, concretamente, também há outra coisa que filma-se muito em Portugal, também se filma muito service, filma-se muito lá para fora. Muitas séries e filmes e publicidades vêm para Portugal filmar, porque de facto temos condições fantásticas e somos mais baratos. Mas isso também, neste momento, há uma grande dificuldade, por exemplo, de arranjar equipas técnicas. Se eu quiser fazer eu cada vez que quero filmar, seja o que for, eu vejo uma arrasca para arranjar a equipa, para montar a equipa, que está toda a gente ocupada, em todos os departamentos, seja o departamento de arte, seja make-up, seja guarda-roupa, seja tudo. Câmara, tudo. Isto significa que isto é um grande problema para quem quer filmar, mas é uma grande oportunidade para vocês. Porque vocês não têm que entrar neste mercado como realizadores e dizer agora sou realizador. Não sei o que é que vocês querem dizer. Isto abre a oportunidade de entrar no meio, de facto, por outros caminhos, por outras portas, em vários departamentos, porque há trabalho. E há falta de técnicos. Há muita falta de técnicos neste momento e, portanto, isto é para quem está a começar agora, é fantástico. Porque vai haver trabalho, é só vocês procurarem. Não vai haver falta de trabalho. Portanto, sejam estagiários, trabalhem de graça no início, mas há trabalho aí para vocês.
John Ford começou como aderecista. E essa ideia das escolas formarem gente só para determinadas funções também tem que se adaptar às realidades. Eu acho que o que o João não está a dizer é fundamental. É que há uma idade para as coisas também. E é muito positivo, é muito excitante. Eu acho que devia mesmo ser quase obrigatório entrar por outras profissões antes de ser realizador. Porque para ser realizador é preciso já ter vivido alguma coisa. E entrar, fazer tudo que uma equipa de cinema necessita para se fazer o filme, montagem, iluminação, assistente de platô, tudo. É uma aproximação lenta que facilita uma maior profundidade também, ver as coisas de vários ângulos. Eu acho que isso é realmente uma grande oportunidade que eu aconselharia para vocês. Só vou dizer uma pequena coisa a propósito das etiquetas do cinema, do género. Uma vez fui ao Alvalade, que estava lá um filme português numa sala, coitadinho, lá desterrado, e eu fui à bilheteira e eu queria um bilhete para a sala, tal. Mas olha que é um filme português. A candura do olhar da...
Não sei. Dizer também o futuro para eles.
Veio aqui um senhor fazer assim. Não sei. Mas
há futuro?
Eu acho que há futuro e acho que é fundamental que exista esse futuro e acho que é fundamental. Eu acho que uma das melhores formas de se aprender, já disse o Peter há pouco e todos nós sabemos, é estar em platô, seja de que forma for, e estar a assistir todas as dinâmicas que existem num platô, que são sem fim, e todas as relações. E eu acho que é muito importante, existindo essa oportunidade, e existe neste momento, não sabemos quanto tempo vai durar esta bolha do audiovisual que está a acontecer neste momento nos técnicos, espero que durante muito tempo, mas eu acho que é muito importante tentar estar em platô e ir percebendo como é que tudo acontece. E quem diz platô tem todas as fases da pós-produção também, que também são muito importantes e onde muitas vezes apanhamos as fases mais decisivas da execução de um processo, que é quando conseguimos perceber as decisões finais de tudo o que se fez até ali. Mas pronto, acho que é isto. Mas há futuro, claro que sim. Tem que haver. Tem que haver. Quer dizer, não vá o Putin.
Ok. Portanto, há futuro. Muito obrigado, Margarida, Tiago, João Nuno, Sérgio. Como estamos atrasados, não vai haver perguntas como costume, mas às 4h30, no intervalo depois da sessão da tarde, haverá um convívio em que, para quem quiser poder fazer perguntas pessoais, falar um pouco, eles estarão aqui. Ok? Muito obrigado por terem cá estado.